Council Bill 42, 2019, introduced by Christiana Mercer Rigby and Deb Young, co-sponsored by Opal Jones and Liz Walsh. This is an act to alter the school facility surcharge and generally relating to the school facility surcharge.
Thank you. So CB 42, 2019 is legislation before the County Council that would increase the school facility surcharge on new development in Howard County. Currently, Howard County experiences significant overcrowding in many of our schools. As the fastest growing county in Maryland, we simply do not have the funding necessary to build the schools we need. After months of analysis and deliberation among the County Council, we determined that $6.80 per square foot would be an appropriate rate to set the surcharge to help fund portions of the next 10 years of school construction that HCPSS has identified in their long-range master plan that are related to new students from new homes. If you'd like to see information on how we reached this number for the increase, there's additional information posted on our Facebook page. As neighboring counties in Maryland have surcharges that far exceed Howard County's current rate of $1.32, our surcharge on new construction has not been adjusted since 2004. An increase to the school facility surcharge does not solve all of our school budget concerns, nor does it attempt to. However, raising the surcharge is a critical first step to ensuring that our children have an adequate school environment that they need to thrive. Ms. Young?
In addition, I would like to thank our state delegation and a special thanks to the bill creator, Delegate Atterbury, for their efforts in passing the enabling legislation needed for this bill. With this increase in revenue, Howard County can one day house our school children in brick and mortar buildings instead of trailers and solve our overcrowding crisis. This increase is based on sound calculations that will meet our needs, support our children, and keep Howard County economically viable.
We have the chair of the school board, Mavis Ellis, as well as school board members Sabina Taj, Vicky Cutronio, and perhaps someone between Vicky and Mark. Oh, yep, Christina Delmont Smalls. Couldn't quite see you there. So we welcome your testimony on CB 42.
Good evening, County Council members. I'm Mavis Ellis, Chair of the Board of Education of Howard County, here tonight to testify on Council Bill 42, Increased School Facility Surcharge. While Dr. Martirano, Superintendent of Schools, had hoped to join me this evening, he sends his regrets. Scott Washington, our Acting Chief Operating Officer, is here on his behalf should the Council have specific questions following the Board's testimony. As an important investment in the long-term growth needs of Howard County and the Howard County Public School System, the Board of Education of Howard County supports Council Bill 42 to increase the school facility surcharge collected from the residential development. It is with great urgency that this Board has come this evening to advocate for revenues to sustain and improve the infrastructure our students, staff, and community members rely on daily. First and foremost is our hope that support for Council Bill 42 will convey a recognition for all stakeholders that the HCPSS capital budget used to both expand capacity to meet growth needs and address aging infrastructure at existing schools cannot survive on current available funds. Specifically, the Board has been advised that revenue available from the county for the FY 2021 is anticipated to be insufficient to fund projects we have long advocated for on behalf of the HCPSS community. Based on decisions made by this Board last year, which included among other projects, priority given to opening High School 13 by school year 2023, completing the Talbot Springs Elementary School replacement by SY 2022, and a renovation and addition at Hammond High School to be completed by SY 2023. Staff proposed a capital budget for FY 2021 in the amount of $135.7 million. However, based on recent estimated available funds from the county, we are instead facing a proposed FY 2021 capital budget of just $56 million. This limited funding pushes Talbot Springs out 5 years to SY 2027 and Hammond out 3 years to SY 2026. Other deferred projects include new elementary school 43 by 4 years, renovation and additions at the middle school and high school levels to SY 2030 and beyond, and the next high school 17 to be determined. We cannot keep promising school improvements to our local families only to continually defer them when funding looks bleak. The school system is dependent on local funds. When the money is scarce, projects cannot move forward as planned. As residential development has a direct corollary impact on the enrollment of students, the proposed increase in the school facilities surcharge is a welcome addition, is additional funding source. $150 million additional funds over 10 years estimated to be garnered from the surcharge would only, however, put a small dent in the growing capital needs of HCPSS. According to the Maryland Department of Planning, with a strong overall population growth and an attractive school system for those with school children who are located in Maryland, Howard County has had 33 consecutive years of total enrollment gain since 1984. Those gains are expected to continue over the next 10 years. Where Howard County's projected percentage of enrollment increase outpaces the next closest county by nearly 5% and is double that of neighboring jurisdictions such as Anne Arundel, Montgomery, and Prince George's. Yet we learned as the Howard County delegation considered authorizing legislation to allow this increase earlier this year that Howard County historically charges one of the lowest school facility surcharge rates in Maryland. As a county, we have underinvested in our school infrastructure. While redistricting is often pointed to as a resolution for overcrowding, current capacity will not keep pace with incoming students. Through the HCPSS feasibility study, which looks at the impact of student population and expected growth on our available infrastructure, we anticipate the capacity utilization of all existing high schools in the county will exceed 110% by 2022, elementary schools by 2028, and middle schools following suit beyond 2030. The necessity for increased revenue goes well beyond 2021. The capital improvement program needs minimally over the next 5 years ranges annually between $104 and $137 million. The school system's long-range master plan, looking at a 10-year capital funding needs, is over $1 billion. Each year we fall short in funding, renovation, and new construction fees increase, while enrollment grows and deferred maintenance costs compound. This board implores the county to consider further increases in the surcharge amount or exploration of a combination of additional revenue sources to meet current and future needs. As we enter the capital budget planning process for FY21, which was presented by the superintendent on September 10th, 2019, and the board will have a public hearing and work session tomorrow, we look forward to working with the council and the county executive to continue discussions around capital funding needs of the Howard County Public School System. The board thanks each member of the county council who introduced and sponsored Council Bill 42 to increase school facility surcharges for their recognition of the impact of development the impact development has on the capacity of our school system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Ellis. And I also recognize Dr. Wu, a school board member who has joined us as well. So thank you. Are there any questions for Chair Ellis or Mr. Washington?
Or for Mr. Washington.
Well, I guess the one question I had is more of a, so we talked about this earlier today, I think almost twice, but the forward funding issue. The way that we fund our capital projects is that the county pays for them and then gets reimbursed. So
Correct.
the county needs to have all of the money up front in order to be able to actually achieve the reimbursement of those projects.
Yes, each year we need to make sure that the budget is fully funded. And when we mean all the money up front, it doesn't mean that you have to have the money for the next 5 years up front, but you have to be in a position to be able to meet that budget each year. And that's why the 10-year long-range plan is so important, because it shows you what kind of commitment you're committing to. The concerns Ms. Ellis raised in regards to the projects that were in question is the fact that now that we're about to finish the design on two of them, meaning High School 13 and also Talbot Spring is about halfway through, is the fact that this time next year, you'll have two of them that will have started construction and one of them about to begin. High School 13 starts in basically around April or May of 2020. Hammond would start in about June of 2020, and Talbot would be in about October 2020. So in order to make sure that you're committing to the funding of those projects for the construction for the long haul, we have to make sure that not just FY 2021 is addressed, but you have to make sure that we see our way to have the funds necessary in 2022, 2023, 2024 in cases of the larger projects.
And if we were to do the methods that other counties use to do school construction, the projects would still be delayed because of the wait that it would take for the state funding?
Yeah, pretty much. I think the biggest thing that gets misconstrued a lot of times is the fact that you have to have that local match for dollars. When the county agrees to that capital budget each year, you're certifying that you will fund that entire budget with or without state participation or reimbursement. Now, does the state reimburse? Yes, we'll qualify for that, but the bottom line is you have to have the funds up front to be able to move forward, and that's the challenges we're having right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Youngman?
It looks like the model, which I just saw the math for the first time. It looks like it takes, your 10-year capital plan, divides it by 12, and we show it being funded dollar for dollar with that fee. Knowing we need the money up front, sometimes a year or two up front, the time it takes to build a school.
Correct.
If we were to establish that income stream and justify to bond underwriters that that's a reliable income stream for 20 years, to be able to borrow up front, but the state couldn't give us as much matching funds up front, how would that work? Would we have like a fund that we could use faster as soon as the state was ready to match?
That's a good question. Actually, I think the biggest concern with the surcharge situation again is the fact that number one, I think it's 150 over a 10-year period is what we're kind of estimating. I think with that. So if that's the case, best case, you were saying about $15 million a year. I think one of the concerns is number one.
No, actually, they're basing this on $700 million.
Okay.
Over 10 years,
okay.
Of which 490 is the county.
Okay.
So we're looking at what, $50 million a year.
Okay.
Well, it's 35% state funding.
Yeah.
I already did that math.
Okay.
It's 700 total, and then if you back out the state funding, we're at the assumption is just under $500 million.
Okay. Wow.
Looks like it's 4,000 or so seats.
Okay.
There's not a date on what the capital plan we used was.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if the 4,000 seats that go with that capital plan is a pre-APFO or post-APFO number.
Okay.
We probably got it from planning. You might not know in your head, but
okay.
It's post-APFO.
It's post-APFO.
But let's double check on that. But I think again, Ms. Young, my biggest concern with that is, again, is that that's not guaranteed funding yet.
Right.
So that's the concern about having the money in place now. For future use, would that be helpful? Absolutely. But I think the concern initially is those current projects that are at stake as we speak.
Because I think what we want to make sure we do with the math is make sure that it's apples and apples between the same set of assumptions on what the need's going to be,
Sure.
as well as what the volume of new square footage is going to be.
Well,
Because
and
if you
that's
use a post-APFO
Okay.
square footage and a faster,
Sure.
enrollment growth, then you're going to be out of whack.
Well, and then that's a discussion we need to make sure we have to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples, dollars to dollars. Then.
Because I do appreciate that. I think that everybody up here worked this math backwards,
Okay.
and really wants this to be a justified number based
Understood.
on, I don't want to say facts, but factual assumptions, if
Sure,
there's such a
understood.
thing.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
We have Joan Drissen, followed by Jacqueline Ng.
Good evening, Council Chair Rigby and council members. I'm Joan Dreesen of Columbia, Maryland, but I'm here tonight on behalf of the Association of Community Service and our over 160 member organizations and community advocates. ACS fully understands the challenge that the county faces in meeting the need for additional funds for new construction, renovation, and maintenance of our public schools. While we are not opposed to an increase in the school facility surcharge in concept, we do oppose Council Bill 42 as written. Without an exemption for the development of affordable housing, the 500% increase in the school facility surcharge has the potential to reduce or eliminate the construction of urgently needed affordable and moderate income housing. Increased fees will ultimately increase the cost of development. We already face a shortfall of over 5,500 units affordable to people making less than 60% of Howard County's median income. This is a significant part of our workforce. This shortage will be exacerbated without a clear exemption for its development. ACS would also suggest that other funding options be considered, particularly since, with the restrictions imposed by APFO, funds generated by this fee are likely very limited. The majority of new students to the school system are generated by resales, not new home sales. An increase in the transfer tax rate and changes in how this tax is allocated would be a legitimate source of funding for school construction and renovation. All residents who buy homes in Howard County, new or existing, benefit from the quality schools that we have here. All should contribute to maintaining this quality. ACS encourages you to reconsider this surcharge as it is currently structured. Given that it would not go into effect until July 1st of 2020, there would seem to be sufficient time to rethink this bill. Thank you for offering me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Ms. Jacqueline Ng, followed by Jennifer Grams. Are you, Mr. Casey, are you Jacqueline Ng?
Jacqueline, yes.
Gotcha.
I believe that the coalition did submit my name, and apparently it didn't get, or I don't mind being Jacqueline either. She is someone worth admiring, and my name is Paul Casey, and I am here today to speak on behalf of the Howard County Housing Affordability Coalition. I'm a resident of Ellicott City, and the coalition that I represent is a broad-based group of 50 organizations and individuals committed to community understanding, policy making, and regulatory decisions which will lead to an increase in and equitable access to housing opportunities throughout our county. We understand that there is a critical need for additional funding for new construction for schools, and we appreciate that CB 42 has been designed by the sponsors as a way to address a substantial shortfall in school capital funding by increasing the school facility surcharge. Nonetheless, we must oppose CB 42 because of serious problems created by its language, including its exorbitant negative impact on housing affordability, the lack of clarity concerning how the increased fee amount was derived, the regressive nature of the fee structure, and the failure to provide a clear, unambiguous exemption for affordable housing. The bill, as you well know, increases the surcharge to $6.80 per square foot on all new residential construction, except senior housing, effective July 1, 2020. This is about a 500% increase to the current $1.32 fee. There is no grandfathering for developments in the queue for building permits or that have secured the necessary financing, and the treatment of affordable housing is at best ambiguous and confusing. The bill appears to exempt only housing that is both senior and affordable from the increased surcharge, and there is no exemption for any other affordable housing, housing that is essential for the children of people who live in the county, our children who want to live in the county in which they grew up, and for many job holders who earn the county median income or less and would like to live near where they work. Obviously, this bill would add significant cost to any new housing, but the most detrimental impact would be on housing that's intended to be affordable, such as single-family townhomes, where the coalition estimates that the average increase would be about $9,200 per dwelling unit, pricing out many limited-income first-time buyers. In addition, it would significantly increase the cost of developing affordable mixed-income apartments. For example, the Artist Flats project in downtown Columbia, which was recently awarded low-income housing tax credits by the state, with a mix of 174 mixed-income units, would have to bear an increased cost of more than $1.4 million, an increase for which there is no source to pay and which would jeopardize the award of tax credits and the entire project. In our view, there is sufficient time before July 2020, when the bill would go into effect, in order to be able to develop and propose a reasonable fee structure that would balance these two important needs: affordable housing and school construction. The school board has not completed its redistricting process, making it difficult to assess its impact as required by the state authorizing law. In addition, the bill does not consider varying the fee for different sized units or using less regressive revenue sources as permitted by the statute or other sources such as the transfer tax. With an effective date of July 1, 2020, there is ample time to bring together a work group who could undertake the thoughtful analysis required by the state law to assist the council and report back to the council with recommendations. The council could then draft alternative legislation based on these recommendations that could effectively balance what we all acknowledge is a critical need for affordable housing and school construction, and develop a more equitable fee structure that would allow us to consider not only the surcharge but other possible sources of financing to create a more equitable arrangement. The coalition does understand that the county faces significant challenges in meeting the educational demands of its families, students, and workforce. We reiterate our recommendations included in a letter we sent to the sponsors concerning the potential increases to the school facility surcharge. A full copy of that letter is attached to the testimony that I submitted. We thank you, as the coalition, for giving us the opportunity to offer these comments. We are available to discuss our concerns about the legislation, and we hope to work with you to be able to craft alternative legislation which would balance both the need for affordable housing and school construction. Thank you.
I have a question. I don't blame you for using the word equitable a couple dozen times in your testimony, since that's the new political buzzword in Howard County these days. Is there any different in the student yield coming out of affordable housing than there is out of market rate housing?
In terms of the number of students?
Yes.
There is much of the affordable housing that we talk about are apartment units.
Right.
And apartment units are typically occupied by smaller families than necessarily those who would occupy individual homes. I think maybe there may be studies done. I know there's a recent rental housing survey which has done an analysis of the cost of rental housing, and there could be studies which would show the occupants. But I think that generally speaking, apartment dwellers have smaller families than individual homeowners. And I think, in fact, the studies show that in the affordable housing projects projected in downtown Columbia, the per student yield was actually fairly low for those projects.
Well, that's because those are studio and one-bedroom units.
There are also some two-bedroom units
Right.
as well.
Right.
And the new
Are
project.
you talking about the M flats in downtown
the
Columbia?
the new Artist Flat project also has 3-bedroom units and will have families.
Right.
Well, and those are the downtown Columbia ones are also luxury apartments, the 2,500. So
Well, there's,
Yes,
some,
but-
there's some affordable in that
But
building.
the new projects that are being built will have a percentage of the units as affordable.
right, but there are none yet. So the yield
That's correct.
for kids coming out of those apartments, I think, is really unknown. We don't have a good feel for that.
For those that exist, that's correct. But the yield studies were done in connection with the new affordable housing downtown plan for downtown Columbia, and there were studies done of the projects that would be built, the tax credit projects in downtown.
One of my frustrations with the enabling legislation is we're now continue to be one of only 3 of the counties of the 14 in Maryland that charge a school surcharge, because 10 don't, that is tied to this square footage model. Now, I do think along the lines we were just talking, the smaller units are going to pay lower fee because there's less square footage, and the 3-bedroom apartments will pay more. So you're accounting for it a little bit. I would have wanted us to have some flexibility to look at number of bedrooms and things like that I think drive student yield as well. But back to the original question of if it is truly our desire to match this fee based on the true student yield coming out of new construction and make that fair, how is it equitable to exempt affordable housing when there's a ton of kids coming out of affordable housing? It's really inequitable.
Didn't you just say we don't know how many kids are coming out of affordable housing?
We're the downtown Columbia affordable housing.
But we do have Monarch Mills. We
Yeah.
have
a lot of kids.
whatever happened around Roger Carter. So we have those estimations on project.
Yeah, and there's a lot of kids. So I'm questioning this sense that, it's like a tax credit. It's like as soon as you start, letting people out, then everybody has to pay. It's going to end up paying more. If we exempt affordable housing, then this $680 may very well end up $8.
Well, if you're trying to get to the gap that is the issue, there are different ways to get to the gap other than just the surcharge.
I agree with you 100%.
And one of the concerns
we're together on that.
Sure. One of the concerns we have is that there is a real significant problem in developing affordable housing. It's probably I've spent most of my career, 30 years, as an affordable housing attorney. It's the most significant, challenging financing that people work on. And it requires pulling together so many different sources because it is so difficult and requires the substantial input of public funding in order to make it work, which is what's happened with the projects we're doing, not just in downtown Columbia, but in other projects being done by the Housing Commission. And what this does is it imposes additional costs and burdens on producing that affordable housing. And as a matter of public policy, we believe that we should not make it more difficult to build that affordable housing because we have an affordable housing gap as well. We have 5,500 units with people who want to work in this county and can't afford to live here. And so that's a public policy that we should recognize and support. And we should find a way to balance the need for school construction. With that, we can do many complicated and difficult things. And there may be other sources of revenue, such as the transfer tax or gradation tax, or maybe looking at geographic location, or maybe saying that certain, as you indicated, Councilman Youngman, with much larger projects, the tax goes up at a higher rate than it does on lower income projects. But certainly there should be a way to address both gaps, because we don't want to create the schools and then not permit the families who could benefit from those schools to live in the county. We're already struggling to do that. We have the master plan being developed for affordable housing in the county because we are so far behind. So we would plead with the council to find a way to balance both the gap we have to address for affordable housing so people who want to work in this county can live here, as well as the gap for school funding. I know it's not easy. We're happy to work with you, but it does require, I think, a more creative approach to what the funding sources could be.
That I agree with. And talk about ways to make the affordable housing problem grow, start adding $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 to every market rate townhouse, on Route 1, which is now you have more and more people who can't afford to live here and need to fall into that affordable housing model. So
Absolutely.
I get concerned that if a certain group doesn't have to pay it, then it exasperates that challenge on the other units getting built. That's all.
Ms. Walsh?
Well, it is obviously a complex problem. You're mentioning Route 1 apartments, but that same rental housing survey indicated that there was actually going to be an oversupply of apartments in certain communities. And those tend to be the same communities that are suffering with overcrowding in schools, but have all kinds of new construction going in. So I do worry about conflating affordable housing and paying for the schools and the seats in the schools that we know that we need. And particularly any analysis that we do that tends to average over the county is always going to undercount what's happening, particularly on the east, and probably happening soon in Columbia and even southeast. There is no symmetry between the demand and what's being produced. And maybe somebody else who's testifying tonight will address this. A real obstacle I have to these kinds of arguments, sir, is that we have this glut that you describe in a mechanism where it's 132. If keeping it at 132 is the panacea for affordable housing, then I don't think that we'd be in this circumstance. I think it's more complicated simply than keeping a fee structure here lower versus other things like a master plan and looking at things on a countywide basis and making all of the elements of providing county and public services as a whole. But that is my struggle coming from where I'm coming and representing who I represent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking my questions. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Jennifer Grams, followed by Bruce Harvey, then Russ Dickens.
Good evening, Jennifer Grams, Ellicott City. I'm very happy to be here tonight testifying in support of CB 42. I want to thank our council members who have put this legislation forward, as well as Delegate Atterbury for her sponsoring the state legislation, and also the citizen advocates who have been working on this change for many, many years. As you know, getting here has been a long road, starting with former County Executive Kittleman's APFO task force. Since the launch of that task force in June 2015, more than 5,500 students have enrolled in our school system. And in that same amount of time, we have opened one additional new school. That was Hanover Hills Elementary in 2018. Just let that settle in for a second. Our school system is falling behind in its ability to build and maintain infrastructure. The recent announcement by Dr. Martirano to postpone capital projects underscores the absolute necessity of increasing this fee. The county's Spending Affordability Committee included a statement of support for raising the school surcharge fee in its FY 2020 report. The committee noted, not only are the combined public school facilities surcharge and building excise tax insufficient to support any new capital projects in the next 20 years, they're insufficient to support existing debt issued years ago. Additionally, the APFO task force studied and discussed the county's school surcharge fee, and they concluded in their April 2016 report that the link between student growth and the construction of new school facilities is growing in significance. The task force voted to approve a motion by which higher fees would be charged for development in areas where projected school enrollment is above capacity. So I'd like to share a couple additional comments about increasing the fees. One, homes that are priced approximately under $250,000 are exempt from this fee, so I think that might address some of the concerns about affordable units. And in addition, as stated previously, the fee is calculated per square foot, so smaller homes are charged less. Secondly, the business and development sectors were well represented on both the APFO task force and the Spending Affordability Committee that recommended increasing these fees. And finally, the suggestion that home prices will increase and or new housing will slow because of the increased fee, in my opinion, is an oversimplification of the market forces that determine housing supply and pricing. Looking at the housing trends of our neighboring counties does not suggest that a higher fee in our county will stifle development. So I look forward to the conversations and appreciate the opportunity. And I will submit a copy of my testimony with citations via email.
Thank you very much. Bruce Harvey, followed by Russ Dickens, then John Pop.
Hello, hi. My name is Bruce Harvey. I live in Elmwood Road in Fulton, Maryland. Been a Howard County resident since 1978, president and majority owner of Williamsburg Homes as well. Obviously testifying on CB 42. I'm actually undeclared on the legislation at this point. I can't support the legislation as it's currently drafted, so I want to focus on amendments that I'm suggesting, some of which have been talked about already. And some since the fee was just released, but the first amendment that I really see we need is a revised fee with a detailed calculation, which obviously I guess is on Facebook at this point. But up to this point, we haven't been able to see that. It's pretty clear from what we can discern that some of the things that we've talked about already in this meeting, that we're taking a master capital budget that includes and that the school system's going to continue to grow at 850 or so students per year, and we need that. Yet the denominator is a reduced APFO square footage, which means we're going to build fewer homes. So that's a mismatch. So I think the fee needs to be, we're going to all look at this calculation. I think the fee needs to be appropriately calculated. And if it is, I can support this legislation. Number two, staging. We need to allow for staging of the fee. To come into play at one full boat is really going to have a difficult impact on the residential market. So the fee increase on what we call a 2,300 square foot home, which in Howard County is a 3,700 square foot home because it includes the basement and a garage, is about $20,000. So if that fee comes on in place in one fell swoop, our 2,300 square foot home, which is not what people think Williamsburg Homes builds, but we do build 2,300 square foot homes as well, that $20,000 is going to have a substantial impact on that purchaser. And they just won't be able to purchase. So staging of the fee over a 4-year period is what I recommend to grandfather, obviously to the fee that's recalculated. Number three, grandfathering of approved projects. Projects that have spent 2 to 4 years getting approvals are unfairly burdened in this and perhaps ruined by the magnitude of that increase. We've talked about affordable housing. That's certainly number 4. I think there's some good suggestions out there in terms of how we need to, MIHUs and affordable housing have to somehow be treated differently. Most importantly, we can't talk about a school surcharge without talking about APFO and growth. We need growth to create revenues. APFO needs to be looked at and adjusted so we can grow. Thank you for hearing my testimony.
Thank you. Russ Dickens, followed by Don Pop, then Leonardo McClarty. We have the seats up there for the on-deck section. Russ Dickens, Don Pop.
Good evening. My name is Dawn Pop, and I live in Elkridge. I'm here tonight to express my strong support for CB 42. At a time when we are sadly seeing such deep divisions within our community, it seems that most of us can still agree on one thing. Our county's infrastructure, and in particular our schools, are not keeping up with the pace of development in this county, and something needs to be done about it. My oldest son, now a junior in college, is a proud graduate of Howard High School. When he started there as a freshman, the school was already overcrowded at approximately 119% utilization. It has become increasingly more overcrowded each year since then, and is now at 135% utilization. And while Howard is the most severe example, it is not the only one. In fact, even if we were to do an even more drastic redistricting than is currently under consideration, there are literally not enough seats in our current schools, in our current high schools, for every school to be at or under 100% utilization next year. And everywhere you look, at least in the northeast part of the county, more homes are being built. So the overcrowding will just keep getting worse. High School 13 is long overdue, and our county is growing so quickly that we should already be planning for High School 14, but sadly that has been proposed to be removed from the long-range capital improvement plan. Equally concerning is the length of time many of our older schools have to wait for desperately needed renovations or replacement. I was dismayed to hear of the proposal to deprioritize the planned replacement of Talbot Springs Elementary School and the much-needed renovation of Hammond High School due to anticipated lack of funding. And I certainly hope that the Board of Education restores these priorities to the capital budget request. But if they do, will the county be able to fund that full request? One of the main reasons that Howard County is such an attractive place to live, and thus that the demand for new development is so high, is the quality and reputation of our school system. Since developers benefit directly from our school system, it is more than reasonable to expect them to pay their fair share toward maintaining it. An increase in the school facilities surcharge is long overdue. I only question whether the proposed increase to $6.80 per square foot is enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Leonardo McClarty, followed by Bruce Taylor and Patricia Sylvester.
Hello and excuse me. Hello and good evening. I'm Leonardo McClarty, a resident of Elkridge, Maryland, but here on behalf of the Howard County Chamber of Commerce. So I think as many have stated already and will probably continue to state this evening, certainly education is something that is on the minds of many, I think always, but certainly at this particular time as we talk about whether it's redistricting or development and so forth. And certainly I think for at least the last probably 2 or 3 years, we've talked heavily about everything from APFO to construction funding to development and so forth. Certainly, I think as we come here at this particular time, the Chamber is particularly concerned as it relates to the current $6.80 number that is being proposed. I think in the conversations that we've had, excuse me, I think that there's an understanding that the surcharge probably needs to be increased from the $1.32. The fundamental question is, what does that number go to, and how do we know that, or better yet, how is it justified in terms of the number that we arrive at? For instance, one of particularly our concerns on the $6.80 is that currently, at least to date, there has not been anything that has been released that ultimately shows the numbers in terms of how we get there. Now, maybe there's been something that's been recently released or what have you. I understand that there's a work session that's going to be coming up Friday where there's going to be an analysis that's presented. But in many previous bills that have been released, we've always, a lot of times, have had data that has coincided with that legislation when it was released. And so certainly I think here the question is, again, if $6.80 is the number, how did we arrive there? And is it really going to get to that $150 million mark that's been proposed? I think as also has been touched on, is there concerns around particularly this middle income or this middle level from a housing perspective, whether that's that $300,000 to $500,000 range, particularly when you start talking about the price of housing and affordability from a purchasing perspective. And so there's obviously concern that this is going to impact that particular group when certainly if you're in that $900,000 to $1 million range in a home purchase standpoint, maybe this additional $20,000 that we're talking about doesn't play as a bigger impact. But certainly if you're in that $300,000 to $400,000, $500,000, then certainly that $25,000 increase could ultimately end up being whether or not you are approved or not approved. And then I think on the next note is the fact that housing is as much an economic development issue as transportation and infrastructure and anything else. When we start talking about businesses coming here to Howard County. Certainly, employees would prefer to be able to live where they work, or at least close to it. And when they don't live where they work or near to where they work, that also puts additional pressures on our roads and on our streets in terms of whether it's, and we're already talk about various challenges at various times about the ability to pave roads and to widen streets and impervious surfaces and so forth. So ultimately, I would just say that the chamber is, at this particular time, is not in support of the legislation, not so much from the perspective of whether or not to increase the number, but the fact of increasing it to 680, which is a significant increase at over and above where we are at this particular time. Lastly, I think, like many in here, we understand the challenge that that you're trying to address in terms of, again, the fact of how do we continue to support our schools, but at the same time, I think we still have to balance that with in terms of market realities and also business impact as well. I think right now there's a lot of times this assumption that, oh, well, business can just adjust or business can afford it. Well, at some point, business can't afford it. And with that, thank you.
I have a question. You want to go? I just wanted to point out, and you're right, that $20,000 increase for folks that are stretching to get into Howard County is tough, but on those $1 million houses, it's $60,000, $70,000. Well, and those are the folks that actually are paying the appropriate amount of taxes to put their 2 or 3 kids in school. You know, it goes back to that whole bedroom thing, and it's unfortunate that we're hamstrung on this square footage thing that, you know, you could have a 3-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom townhome and a 4-bedroom house that just happens to have a ton of square footage, and you got the same amount of kids in school, yet the latter's paying, you know, 3 times the impact fee. We can't change it, unfortunately. The delegation didn't give us that leeway, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, or do you just...
Mr. McCarty, I just wanted to thank you for coming out tonight. We actually do have calculations on how we arrived at the $6.80, and it's in a video that has been completed, and right now it's on a Facebook site. But we are going to have that attached to the council site, so it'll be more easily available to people.
We can do it as supporting documentation.
We'll do, yeah, we'll do
bill.
it, yes. And I also just wanted to remind you and the members of the chamber that when the state delegation passed this legislation, they were very specific about all of the items that we had to take into consideration as we reached a number to for this particular legislation to move from $1.32 to $6.80. And we were very careful to look at every single one of those items that we were told that we needed to review. That doesn't mean that we aren't hearing you, but I'm just saying that we were very careful in these calculations, and I hope that when you see this video, you'll understand that.
Thank you, and I'll check it out.
Thank you. Bruce Taylor, followed by Patricia Sylvester, then Peter Engel. Is Mr. Taylor here? All right, Patricia Sylvester.
Good evening. My name is Pat Sylvester. I am the president of the Columbia Downtown Housing Corporation, and CDHC is opposed to Council Bill 42. It will cripple development of affordable housing in downtown, and it will cripple development of affordable housing generally. CDHC has been working since 2012 to ensure downtown includes affordable housing, and there is now a viable, achievable plan that was just passed 2 years ago. after significant public discourse and debate. And just last month, the first affordable housing development, Artist Flats, for downtown Columbia, received an award of tax credits from the state. This means the project can proceed, and it is something to celebrate, except Council Bill 42 will add $1,453,000 to the cost, and there is no source to pay this unanticipated cost. This is an excessive burden and likely will cost the project its state award. CB 42 will also add $2.75 million to the cost of each Howard Hughes rental building in downtown. These buildings are also required under the downtown plan and the DRRA to include 6 to 10% affordable units. This expense is being added to the downtown development despite the fact of the contributions that are already being made to school construction that are included in the downtown plan. The Howard Hughes Corporation has donated 3 school sites worth between $17 to $32 million to the Howard County Public School System. They pay an additional $1.33 per square foot on all residential and commercial development to a fund that can be used for public facilities, including schools. And the TIF district is structured so that $45 million of the GO bonds can be used to build a new elementary school. We recommend strongly an exemption from the increase for downtown, given the comprehensive plan currently in place and the cost downtown is already contributing for schools. We also think that affordable development should be exempted. These developments only work with extensive public funds. Adding additional costs to a project that is maximizing state and federal resources is poor public policy. It robs Peter to pay Paul. Essentially, what you will require is that limited housing dollars that are supposed to create new affordable housing are now going to be redirected into a fund that will build schools. That's not a balance. Given redistricting and APFO, what's the likelihood that the new fee will actually be realized, since APFO seems to prevent any new development now, and the current redistricting plan, as we understand it, isn't going to open any other areas in the county for development. It doesn't change that. There are 7 criteria that you are required to consider under the state law. It's hard to understand what you did consider and what you didn't consider. But it seems unusual that you would be able to study the impact of school redistricting, which has barely begun. Did you consider charging different amounts for different sized units? Was there actual consideration of the effect on affordable housing units? I know the letter HAC submitted did not end up getting into any aspect of this bill. We understand the need to raise funds for schools. But all current and future people in the county benefit from the schools. The people that have been living here and bought new homes since 2004 contribute to the need. They benefit from the need. Why can't we all share the burden? Why can't we spread the cost? Why limit it to just new development? A 500% increase in the fee will cripple affordable housing development. Take the time to do it right. We're willing to work with you. We understand both need to happen. Consider changing the transfer tax. Perhaps we need to raise property taxes on everyone. We all benefit from the schools. I have no kids in the school, but I believe we all should be paying. Don't put all this fee on one small group. Thank you.
I was going to chime in that even though I've been poo-pooing the math for a half hour, that this does only pass on to new development the 42% that the school system has told us comes from new development. There's still 58% of the need that is unfunded that's not being passed on. So just
You have
want
access
to point
to
that
things
out.
we don't have access to.
That's right, because the math just got put on Facebook an hour ago,
Then I don't belong to Facebook.
We will upload it as supporting documentation.
but I watched it.
Peter Engel, who will be followed by Angelica Bailey, then Regan Mercer.
Good evening. I'm Peter Engel, the Executive Director of the Howard County Housing Commission. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify regarding Council Bill 42. As the county's primary provider of affordable housing, the county's schools are of utmost importance to our families. High-quality schools are crucial to the future success of the children who live in Housing Commission properties. Numerous studies show the benefits of living and attending schools in areas of opportunity of the type that Howard County provides. That being said, raising the impact fee by about $5.50 per square foot on affordable housing will severely impact our ability to create more housing for those very families who need our schools the most. The Commission opposes CB 42 because it does not balance our need for school funding with our need for affordable housing, and we ask that the bill be amended to include an exception for affordable housing for families, not just affordable housing for seniors. Stable, affordable housing allows parents to focus on their work and their children. It allows employers to hire locally, removing traffic from our roads and making Howard County a better place in which to locate a business. By freeing families from the stress and fear of losing their homes, it improves their health measurably, meaning less taxpayer-funded emergency room visits. It reduces the high cost of addressing homelessness, including police, fire, and emergency services, temporary housing, and staff-intensive casework. It allows children to thrive in school. If not a moral obligation, housing equity makes economic sense and advances the quality of life in the county for all of us. There are two developments that will be most directly and immediately impacted by the fee increase. The first is the 174-unit mixed-income Artist Flats project that's intended under the downtown plan to be built on top of the new cultural center. You've heard about that from other speakers. It raises the cost of that project by an estimated $1.45 million, which is a potential fatal blow to the planned financing. For projects relying on low-income housing tax credits, the budget must be firmly established at the time of application. Changes to that budget would result in changes to the score that the project received under the state allocation system. Artist Flats is one of 15 projects selected out of 47 by the state. The difference between winners and losers was hundredths of a point. A revaluation for this project would be extremely serious. There's no easy source to make up the extra money for the increased fee. Artist Flats has maximized the amount of debt it can use and is already deferring much of its fees. The budget relies heavily on state assistance in the form of loans and grants, which cannot be increased. At this time, we don't know of any way to pay for the new requirement. A second affordable development that was fortunate enough to win in the state's low-income housing tax credit round is Ellicott Gardens 2. This development would see an increase in costs of about $450,000 under the bill and also has no way to pay for it. More generally, applying the new impact fee to affordable housing will mean that the Commission can create less new affordable housing. It would also mean a greater struggle to create the housing already in our pipeline, specifically the downtown Columbia buildings that are intended to bring hundreds of affordable units. The reduction in development will also harm production of moderate-income housing units. Affordable housing has one crucial financing difference from market-rate housing. Virtually all new affordable housing maximizes the amount of private resources that it can obtain and then relies on state and federal funding to fill the gap. Increasing the impact fee on affordable housing simply increases the amount of state and federal subsidy necessary for the development. The result is that very scarce government funds intended for affordable housing are instead spent on school construction. Even if this were possible, it would not be good policy. The loss of funds for housing means higher costs in other parts of the county budget for all of us. The Commission fully recognizes the need for additional school construction funding. However, as with many policies, this one needs to be balanced with other county needs. To add the fee to affordable housing helps our schools, but at the expense of exacerbating the ongoing housing crisis. We ask that the Council create an exception for affordable housing in the proposed legislation. Ideally, the exception would exempt housing developments that have at least 40% of the units reserved for households with incomes of 60% or less of the area median income. And I know there are a lot of numbers in there. So we would be happy to discuss the amendments to the bill that would balance both housing and school concerns. We strongly believe that this can be done and look forward to working with you going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. All right, thank you. We have Angelica Bailey, followed by Regan Mercer, and then Aaron Dunwoody.
It's a little warmer in here tonight. It's nice. Angelica Bailey on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association, here to testify against CB 42. Thank you in advance for your time and your consideration. We have a lot to say tonight, obviously, as I'm sure you can imagine. One of the biggest points that we want to drive home, we are still struggling to understand the basis for the $6.80 amount. The amount should have a nexus to the actual cost of development. If this tax is going to increase, the amount should be justifiable. Even if it goes up, we don't believe it will solve the problem. If the price is too high, we can't build. It's very simple. And if we can't build, the bill won't generate funds. And we have to consider ATFO here. As a result of ATFO, members cannot build in the majority of Howard County for the foreseeable future. Whatever fees their limited building will generate will not be sufficient enough to make much of a difference, let alone build a new school. We do believe this would have a negative impact for the county. First of all, we do feel that it is anti-business. Development is an economic driver. It brings jobs, encourages home buying, contributes to the county's budget, and strengthens the county's tax base. Businesses move to business-friendly counties and bring their employees and tax payments and customers with them. But more importantly, this affects affordability, as we've heard, and all homes should be affordable. But this becomes a regressive tax when the cost gets passed on to the home buyer. For example, this tax applied to a 2,400 square foot home would take it from an additional $3,168 to over $16,000. That's a big increase, and that's just this tax. That doesn't take into account permit fees or road taxes or subdivision fees or any of the other costs of doing business as a developer. And all of that gets passed on to the home buyer. All of that increases the cost of the home itself. The higher income market may be able to absorb that a little more easily, but the middle and lower income markets won't be able to, and that makes this a regressive tax on home buyers. As a result, developers may even be more inclined to build bigger, more expensive homes that can more easily absorb this new cost, rather than middle market and lower income homes that this county really needs. And that all means it will be harder to buy any home, not just new homes. We have a high demand and a limited supply in Howard County, understandably. But with a limited supply, people are willing to pay more, and that drives up the cost of housing. That does not just affect our new neighbors, but anyone who already lives here and wants to move somewhere else in the county but stay in the county will have to deal with higher costs. Howard County needs development. The 2019 Spending Affordability Report demonstrated how vital new development is to the financial health of Howard County, and the county needs to keep its tax base in order to continue to provide quality services. In closing, increasing this tax is not great for our industry, of course, but we really do believe it's bad for the county. If it's too expensive to build in Howard County, we either have to move to friendlier counties or stop building. That's bad for the people who want to live here. It's bad for employees of businesses that work to build houses, and it means that this tax won't actually generate much funds. But it's also bad for the county. The cost of homes we do build will have to increase to make up for the tax increase. Housing all across the county will get more expensive. With the negative impact on housing affordability overall and the lack of clarity concerning how this amount came to be, we do request that you vote no on this housing tax and no on CB 42. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you.
Regan Mercer, followed by Aaron Dunwoody.
Hi, my name is Regan Mercer. I live in Stevens Forest, and I watched your video on Facebook. So I understand how you got these numbers.
Thank you, Regan.
Also, it wasn't posted yesterday. It was sometime last week. For too long, developers in this county have, in comparison to next door counties where they seem to also have no trouble building, used our schools as a selling point while minimally contributing to the maintenance of those schools. If they didn't want a 500% fee increase, they should not have lobbied against other earlier increases or the ability for us to do so. The only problem I have with this bill as written is while there's an exemption for affordable single-family homes under $250K, which the developers should take as a reason to build more of them, there's no exception that allows them to offset the total cost increase to apartments by giving an exemption for affordable housing square footage. I would like an amendment that allows affordable housing square footage to be at the old 1.32 rate or even exempted entirely. We have a huge gap, as other people have mentioned, in affordable housing in this county, and apartments contribute fewer students than single-family homes when we look at market rate. So encouraging them to build single-family by to build affordable housing into their plans at a higher rate by exempting it by square footage as opposed to percentage of product would encourage the growth of affordable housing in this county. I understand also that senior market, and am I correct on this, senior market rate housing is also exempted because of the state.
Yes.
I would like to ask you to petition our state delegates to remove that. While there's a big push for it now because of baby boomers, due to the financial and career setbacks that the recession has caused for millennials and late Gen Xers, the likelihood of them being able to afford luxury 55 up single-family homes in the future is unlikely, and these communities will probably revert to regular single-family homes. We have to look towards the future, so these homes should also be subject to the school surcharge fee.
Couple of things. The affordable senior housing isn't just this 55 plus. Senior housing would be something more along the lines of a congregate care facility, one. And two, I just need to, I heard this all through APFO. 55 plus communities can't just decide they're not going to be 55 plus communities anymore. And that is one of the more rampant rumors floating around the county. You know, the tough thing when we talk about encouraging more apartments and encouraging more affordable apartments is, you'll recall the many hours we spent in here talking about the school operating budget. And we are going down a trend where the tax base from a particular housing unit compared to the students that they're putting into our schools is closing rapidly. So encouraging more apartments is actually might seem to make sense, but from an operating budget standpoint is the absolute opposite that we need to be doing, unless we're just going to raise everybody's taxes on top of paying more for their homes and things. So I just want to point out that some of this stuff sounds good, but when you need to do the math and you're the five of us sitting up here trying to figure out how to make ends meet and the dollars work, a lot of the housing trends in Howard County are making our job and the Board of Ed's job even harder every year. So it's just one last thing. We talk a lot about what surrounding counties charge. Carroll County doesn't charge any. Harford County doesn't charge any. They're not really surrounding. Anne Arundel, Frederick, Montgomery, all charge about 2.5 times what we charge, so that would bring this up to about $4. We go to $6.80. We're going to be far and above the highest. So if we're looking to compare ourselves to other counties and look at where someone might go to decide to buy that same house because it's a little cheaper, or where a developer might go to build those townhouses, Our competition is Anne Arundel County. It's PG County. It's some of these other counties. So while we want to pay for school construction, we have to be cognizant of the unintended consequences of the number. So that's all.
We can talk about it more in the work session, but when you take the flat fee and then you divide it by the square footage of their apartments versus their single family homes, I mean, the apartment rate that they basically charge in Montgomery is way higher than 680.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is, because they use the flat fee, and
right.
we're one of only 3. Yes. It was interesting, an email I saw going around yesterday, which then caused our boxes to blow up, that we are the lowest per square foot in the state. Well, of the 3 counties that do it by square footage, of the 14 that do it, yes, we are. But we're actually the 6th or 7th highest in the state, with 10 counties not charging it at all. So just want to make sure we stick with real life when we debate this stuff.
Thank you. Aaron Dunwoody, who will be followed by Colleen Morris.
Hello. I'm not a large entity like the people that have talked to you. I'm a single entity, and I think you guys are missing something that's important. I'm just a guy trying to build a house in his backyard, and you're charging me 500% on one line item. Okay, back in 2018, I submitted paperwork to start subdividing my lot in order to build a house in my backyard, but in September that same year, I was stopped because the schools were overcrowded. So I had to wait year after year after year. And so now, in August of 2019, I was allowed to record my plat. And also, I submitted my site development plan in August of this year, okay? So next year, I'm going to be facing this 500% increase. Now, we're talking about 6 years and a 500% increase. Now, it doesn't sound like a whole lot to you, but I can't pass along costs. I have to eat that, okay? So your fee, the fee of $85, would, in my particular instance, would be $8,500, which would go up to over $43,000. That's real money. You know, I can't borrow that from the bank because it's not something I can borrow. And there are other fees involved with building my home. I'm just a simple guy trying to build a home in my backyard, okay? And I think that, I don't know if you understand what that feels like to me. There's 2 things it feels like. First of all, my budget was set back in 2013, and it doesn't have that flexibility of an extra $40-some-odd thousand. That what you're doing to me feels like I saved up for my kids' college, and they're about to graduate, and then the college says, "Oh no, there's a 500% surcharge you have to pay before your son or daughter can graduate from college." You say, "Wait a minute, that's not fair." That's what you're doing to me, and there's nothing. And I'm not one of these guys that I don't live and breathe this stuff, so I don't know all the details, I'll be honest with you. But from what I understand, there's nothing that helps me, and you're going to hurt me. And there should be some type of mechanism that accommodates me and people in my situation, because I can tell you, if there's anyone else behind me, 6 years behind me, starting this process, they don't know about this because I just found out about it. And how do you adjust for that when you're going through the process? What I'm suggesting is that somehow you grandfather. Okay.
You can finish your sentence.
Well, there's 3 points that you grandfather someone in my circumstance, because, again, we're small entities. How many of there aren't that many people like me doing this, right? And somehow there should be some type of incremental charge, again, because we're doing this for 6, 7, because next year I'll build, but you're talking a 7-year process. So, you know, if a person started 3-4 years ago, they're going to be hit with this fee, and they don't even know it's coming. I can tell you that right now. And you should also notify people in the system that this is coming, because they don't know. They really don't know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Colleen Morris, followed by Nate Foreman.
Good evening. My name is Colleen Morris, and I'm the proud president for over 6,000 educators in the Howard County Public School System. These educators show up every day for the 58,000 students in our system, and they strive to differentiate for all students in overcrowded classrooms. What they cannot control is the accompanying scheduling issues that constantly impact their working conditions. For example, Fulton Elementary has primary students in 4-hour blocks of instruction straight, 7- and 8-year-olds, due to the scheduling around one gym for their almost 1,000 students. Student safety and their learning conditions are directly impacted by the physical space and conditions of our schools. These issues usually don't make headlines until the problems are so extreme because educators are used to being flexible and having to make do on a daily basis. I remember when 2 sprinkle classes were in a gym at one time. If you don't know, sprinkling is when you take 3 classes and put them into 2. So now you have 75 students instead of 50. For related arts, and it creates a lot of bodies in one place. So a child wearing a head wrap was using the pegboard in PE, and her scarf got caught in the peg while her hand slipped. Unfortunately, she lost consciousness before the teacher reached her. But it could have been much more serious if the teacher had not gotten to her in time and actually was tall and strong enough to lift her and get her down. That's what happens when you have 2 teachers and 75 students doing a bunch of stuff at one time. What was the result? Not smaller class sizes, not the elimination of the sprinkling practice, and not more teaching space, but the elimination of the pegboards. In addition, our educators teach in climates that can sometimes vary from 50-some degrees to the high 90s because of HVAC issues. I'm actually a little cold in here, just so you know. Imagine the hallways and classrooms of Howard High School packed with their approximately 1,900 students in such conditions. Or the parents of Hammond High School's students trying unsuccessfully to reach the school on phones that don't always work when it rains. And now we might have to put off that construction. No matter what the issue, safety, environmental air quality, mold remediation, sewage pipes breaking, or gas lines leaking in science labs, which all happens, our educators and students continue on. And Howard County continues to be the place of choice for many residents because of the value that we place on education. We know that you all recognize and value this system as well, and we are imploring you to vote in support of CB 42 and the school facility surcharge. Additional revenues are needed to update and maintain our existing buildings while also preparing for new construction to mediate and provide for our fastest growing population. The current county revenues are not enough to provide for adequate public facilities for either the capital or the operating costs of the HCPSS. I heard someone earlier say we should all bear that burden. Well, we are all going to bear that burden. Taxpayers, transfer tax, we need it all. Everyone is going to have to take a serious look at what we want for our county in order to protect and provide for our priorities. We appreciate our state elected officials for enabling this legislation and each of you for enacting it. Our students are counting on the citizens of Howard County and our elected leaders to do the right thing. Our students can't wait for the learning environments they need to be successful. And I keep hearing all about these burdens. What about the burdens that the students and the staff are facing every single day in these overcrowded situations? Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Nate Foreman, followed by David Wessner, then Susan Garber.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. My name is Nate Foreman, and I'm a resident of Owen Brown. I am here to oppose the CB 42 2019, and I don't want to necessarily, I have submitted written testimony, so I'm not going to rehash that or a lot of the other points that fellow citizens have made against this bill, but I do want to bring it to the council's attention that there's been a lot of talk of how neighboring jurisdictions handle the school facility surcharge. And I will say for a fact that Prince George's County does have a two-tiered system. There's inside the Beltway, around metro systems, and outside the Beltway. And the idea behind that is to at least encourage development in the areas the county wants to see development in. So if the county council is inclined to agree to a raise in the surcharge, then I would at least ask that it be directed to areas to discourage development and then maybe be lowered or to have a not highest rate to areas to encourage development in that area. And so it is getting late, and I know there's a lot of other speakers behind me, so I will yield the rest of my time.
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
On that PG County system, what are they trying to? Are they trying to encourage a certain type of development, or just development in certain areas?
A development in certain areas.
Do you know if it's balanced between townhouse and single-family detached or anything like that?
Every dwelling. So the way it is actually broken down is that, and pardon me, sometimes I get the school facilities and the public safety mixed up as to which one actually applies to what. But I believe for the schools, it is all dwelling units at the time of building permit pay basically half the fee you would pay outside of the Beltway, and I believe outside of like a half mile of a metro station or other mass transit system.
So it's sort of like an enterprise zone sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah, and that's where the county, they've gone through a master planning process for, they had a 2002 plan, then a 2014, and they've really highlighted areas they want to see development. And then one way they did that was through the school facility surcharge and having discounted in those areas.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Does the Inside the Beltway also encourage people to build near public transit? Was that the...
Yes, because that's where the county is focusing a lot of their resources.
We don't have any in Howard County, so that's an issue.
But there are areas that the county does want to see development, which is, I believe, around the Route 1 corridor. Isn't there a whole master plan on their way about this is where they want to see development?
True.
It is again in the master planning process.
In process.
It is. Again, for the, I think, third or fourth time we are back to Route 1 master planning, but I'm glad it is happening again.
It seems like that is where the county wants to see development. That's why they have the master plan, unless I'm incorrect there. Thank you.
It depends, but thank you very much, Mr. Foreman. Thank you for coming out. Susan Garber, followed by Robert Dorsey, then Chow Wu. Sorry, is David Wessner here? Okay, all right. Thank you, Ms. Garber.
Good evening. Susan Garber, board member of Howard County Citizens Association, speaking on behalf of the association. The HCCA has consistently supported the increase of school facility surcharges to assure the provision of adequate public facilities at both the county and the state levels. We support CB 42, and we wish to comment on both the economic and the psychological factors involved in the discussion of this bill. It's perhaps understandable that those in the development community have or will provide much testimony of the doom and gloom variety, not only on CB 42, but on all other bills and resolutions during this September session, which hold the potential of change in the form of increased fees and or more restrictive regulations. When one faces change, we naturally focus more on what we might lose rather than what we might get. This phenomenon is explained simply in Psychology Today, March 8, 2018, which is attached to my testimony. One might attribute these strong and sometimes irrational responses of the building industry to the theory of loss aversion. The theory of loss aversion refers to people's tendency to prefer avoiding losses over acquiring equivalent gains. To paraphrase, one tends to become extremely attached to what one has, be that possession, privilege, or position. Ironically, the more we have, the more vulnerable we are. Our aversion to loss is a strong emotion. It is an expression of fear and anxiety. It's only human nature to want to try to help others who are expressing emotion. But counsel, please beware. Don't fall into the same trap as your predecessors. The development in Howard County has been able to accumulate much wealth as a result of Howard government facilitating rather than regulating development, and by substantially subsidizing development through maintaining fees much lower than surrounding jurisdictions for decades. Note that that was a decision of Howard government, not the citizens who bestowed these financial benefits on the Development Committee. By failing their fiduciary duty to assure that new development would contribute fees to provide adequate public facilities, both our county leaders and state delegation have placed citizens in an unenviable position, one without adequate facilities and with little money to pay for them. While the development community is expressing their fears over the potential profit loss new legislation may subject them to, they're bolstered by their professional organization with a paid staff that tracks legislation and provides talking points from their headquarters building. HCCA voluntarily adds our voice to the citizens who, without such organizational benefits, have been trying to express their great sense of loss for a long time, only to feel they're not being heard. Developers aren't the only ones who are loss averse. Your taxpayers are anxious and fearful over the loss of the dreams they too have worked hard for, like a place where their children and grandchildren can obtain a quality education without fearing for their safety as they receive instruction in plywood classrooms, or place where forest and sensitive environmental and historic properties are preserved and prioritized instead of disappearing at frightening rates. And a place where they can get home safely with time to spend with their family instead of sitting in gridlock. The development community always refers to the need for predictability. Your citizens need predictability as well. Predictability of what school their child will attend, of what year their road will finally be repaved, whether it's safe to go to bed when heavy rains are predicted. You can check out the rest of my written testimony. I'll just leave you with the final two statements. Simply put, the public is asking you to derail the gravy train of subsidies to developers. Citizens are tired of paying the development industry's freight. Developers need to pay their own fare, and one that is fair. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Robert Dorsey, followed by Chow Wu, followed by Jennifer Spiegel.
Good evening. My name is Rob Dorsey, and I'm a local home builder, born and raised here in Howard County. I developed my lifelong passion for home building from the time I was 7 years old, going to job sites with my father, who retired in 2003. My company is celebrating 50 years of building exclusively in this county, and all of my employees and many of my subcontractors live here as well. I strongly oppose CB 42 for the following reasons. You may or may not recall that 10 years ago, there were 15 to 20 local new home builders in Howard County. Today, there's only a handful, due in part to the limited supply of undeveloped land. It is obvious that Howard County needs new development, as it is vital to the county's financial health. Home builders and developers need predictability from government. This bill is anything but predictable, especially when one considers that substantial investments have already been made for future projects by builders and developers like myself based on the permit fees in place at the time. Trying to justify this increase based on neighboring counties doesn't take into account that those counties have much lower land cost. It's definitely not apples to apples. My sales manager, with 20 years of experience on the front lines of new home sales in Howard County, informs me that he is already routinely losing clients who end up purchasing in Anne Arundel, Baltimore, Frederick, and Montgomery counties due primarily to price considerations. With prices already at their peak in Howard County, this increase will not only drive away more potential tax-paying buyers, but will also drive away small local builders as well as larger national builders whose profits margins are already strained. When the remaining new home builders begin to vacate Howard County for greener pastures elsewhere, not only will the anticipated revenue stream from this proposed increase simply not happen, but the economic law of supply and demand will drive up the price of an already insufficient resale market disproportionately, causing even more buyers to seek more reasonable pricing elsewhere and thus further eroding the tax base. The landowner of undeveloped land is the one most likely to take the brunt of this proposed legislation. In closing, let me say this. I strive to...
You can finish your sentence.
I strive to make a reasonable profit for the service that I provide that doesn't even cover the tremendous amount of risks I undertake as a Howard County new home builder. The perceptions of the general public, and perhaps even this council, that builders and developers are easily making enough profits to cover this proposed increase is simply false. My company this year has already paid Howard County over $1 million in this fiscal year alone. I would go as far to invite this council to sit down with me at my office to review my books so I can prove this to you. And lastly, I would request this council that you show me where the undeveloped land to accommodate 30 million square feet of new housing over the next 10 years that was projected. I search for new land opportunities every day, and I know for a fact that this number is grossly exaggerated. CB 42 is anti-business. It will fail as a solution to new school funding, and is bad for Howard County in general. Thank you for your time tonight, and allow me to express my opposition to CB 42.
Thank you. Just so, the numbers came from DPZ's post-APFO.
Excuse me?
The numbers came from Department of Planning and Zoning's post-APFO projections.
Okay. I was just
no, that's all right.
Where
I
all
just
this land is,
wanted to let you know. Thank you. Chow Wu, followed by Jennifer Spiegel, then Michael McCann.
Good evening. My name is Chow Wu, a board member of Howard County Board of Education. My colleague already testified on behalf of the board. Here I'm testifying as a general citizen. I applaud our council member, Young, Rigby, and introducing the bill, and Johnson Walsh sponsored it. I also want to thank our delegate, Atterbury, for introducing the bill in the State House. I also want to thank many community members who are advocating for this bill. This is a long overdue bill that the county is waiting for. Our school system is facing a deep crisis, both in the operating budget and the capital budget. We should all work together to address this problem little by little. In the operating budget side for FY 2021, we need an extra $60 million on top of FY 2020 approved budget to meet our obligations, and another $37 million to pay back the health care fund deficit. Without that, we will continue the same pain as the last fiscal year in May. We had the surplus teachers, cut programs, and find a way to save every penny to balance the school budget. In the capital budget side, overcrowded schools, widely deployed portable classroom, all of them need money to repair and replace. We want to make sure High School 13 will be built on time, and make sure Tablet Spring Elementary School replacement and Hammond High School renovation will be back on the agenda as soon as possible. We also need another high school in Elkridge, High School 14, to balance our capacity. We need another Turf Valley Elementary School to deal with the fast student growth there. We may need another renovation on St. John's Lane Elementary School, which is one of the oldest schools in our county. Our school system mostly depends on local funds. With the proposed increase of this development impact fee, the county is expecting $50 million additional funds over the next 10 years. At the same time, we wish that every year we are able to receive $15 million per year starting next year, if everything goes smoothly, to start our delayed capital project. That means we can begin to build a new elementary school. Despite these huge difficulties we're facing, I'm deeply appreciative of our teachers, staff, and management team in the school. They're working together and help each student. Every light is on. Even the room temperature is 1 degree hotter in summer or 1 degree colder in winter, not very comfortably. However, we work together, and I hope the council passes the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. Just going to say that last year the county grew by $30 million, and you just said $60 million to meet your obligations, plus $37 for the health fund. So that is already a math problem brewing in
I can come back.
Yeah. It's like,
those hard-working Board of Ed members. Look at him.
I remember the number very well. Let me tell you that, right? So that $6 million come, $8 million healthcare, and each year their cost increase, right? It's around $8 million. And the student growth is $12 million, right? That's $20 million. And the salary increase, probably $30 million. That's $50 million, right? Another, we use 1 year, we use the one-time spending to cover the recurring costs. That means just starting the FY 2021, we're short of $12 million. So that's around $60 million.
Yeah. Well, we will absolutely welcome your suggestions for increasing revenue, so that way we can increase your revenue.
and I want to thank you for bringing it up, even though we're here talking about capital tonight, and that's operating. But it does go back to this conversation about who we're going to exempt and what kind of housing we're going to incent people to build. The disparity between the tax base per housing unit or per child in the schools is shrinking, and that doesn't fund construction. That funds teachers, operations, and for the last couple of years, that's why we're continuing to have this squeeze. And next year is going to be the same conversation as we just had. So we have to think long and hard about that. So
sure, I just think the body council, county government, our school board always look at the numbers, and I just feel there may be a lot of tough years ahead, and we want to make sure we have a stream, steady, and revenue come to both the capital budget and the operating budget. Otherwise, we have a really deep trouble ahead of us.
And you can't do long-term planning. So
sure.
You know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We will not bore everybody here with budget talk because we get to talk about it next week together. So next we have Jennifer Spiegel, followed by Michael McCann, followed by Carlene Penna.
Good evening. I am Jen Spiegel from Ellicott City, Maryland, and I'm District 5. I am happy to be here tonight in support of CB 42, and I am very happy to say thank you to council members Mercer Rigby, Jones, Walsh, and Jung, who have co-sponsored CB 42. I'd also like to thank Delegate Atterbury for her tireless work to enable this legislation at the state level. We as a county have been debating the topic of increased impact fees for several years. Exemptions were analyzed and discussed in Annapolis during the state delegation work sessions. The only decision for the council is the actual dollar amount. Our school system is facing budget shortfalls and rising deferred maintenance costs, and we are all aware of the numbers. We know how many new children are coming into the schools each year. It's time to act to financially support our schools and our children. We cannot wait any longer, and we shouldn't. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Short and sweet.
District 5 gets to the point, short and sweet.
Short and sweet.
Thank you.
Michael McCann, followed by Carleen Penna, then Daniel Britt.
Good evening, Council Chair, Council Vice Chair, esteemed council members. My name is Mike McCann, and I am a principal with a small local engineering firm that has had the pleasure to work with many builders in this room today, Howard County Public School System, and homeowners like the gentleman that spoke earlier about building his house in his backyard. In my opinion, the Howard County school system is second to none. And with that in mind, and again, I'll try to be brief given the prior testimony, we still hear funding issues, budget issues, which I know is a different conversation. And some of our builder partners in this room might object to this statement, but I think most folks do agree that we should pay our fair share. The information I realize was posted very recently, so I don't have a feeling one way or another if it's reasonable, but it certainly sounds, seems, and feels very unreasonable. But I think we're missing the point. And the point is we are in dire need today. We just heard it from one of the Board of Education members. We're in dire need today for funding. And that solution is not just in some increase for new construction, which is a very small percentage of the total revenue needed. It needs to be broad-based. We all enjoy the benefits of our school system. Whether or not we have kids that go to the school or not, our property values are impacted by it. Our ability to sell houses are impacted by it. And that should be the discussion in my mind. Again, my opinion, I don't think we should waver from maintaining and improving the quality of our schools, our teachers, deferred maintenance, every dollar associated with Howard County Public Schools. And I feel like unless the conversation is broader, unless the solution is broader, we're setting ourselves up for failure. So I would implore this council to continue to discuss and push for those funding mechanisms today, even those mechanisms that might not have necessarily be politically popular. It's what we need. It's what this county needs, and I hope you do the right thing. Thank you very much for your time.
Which mechanisms are you suggesting that would be politically unpopular?
I think anytime you hear the raising of taxes, I think that's politically unpopular. And I think you've heard from prior folks testifying tonight, I think this bill, as it's proposed, is a regressive tax. And I don't think that's fair. I think, again, we all enjoy the benefits of the school system in one way or another, and I think those how we handle that should be handled, or how we address that should be handled equally as well.
But you discussed other taxes, and I'm just, other than, I mean, everybody tonight has said raise the transfer, or a number of people tonight have said raise the transfer tax. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who don't know what a transfer tax is, that's a tax you pay when you buy a house, when you move into Howard County. So that's why people are suggesting that, because there are a lot of people who move into Howard County with kids. So that seems to be a fair tax to raise. Are there other taxes that you would suggest that we raise?
I don't know that anything should be off the table. Property taxes, potentially. And I mentioned that I'm a principal with an engineering firm. I'm not an accountant. I don't have access or quite understand all of the funding mechanisms available to you. Some of the builders in this room might even argue that I'm not even a good engineer, but what I would tell you is that we need to look at solutions that are very broad-based, and we need to act quickly because our schools, our kids, our schools deserve it.
I have two questions. Since you work for some public school systems, different counties, maybe?
We do, in this county and one other.
What are our costs for construction look like compared to other counties?
We are not involved in the costing side of the work for schools. It's all, I'll call it entitlements, engineering, construction drawings, but there's typically a general contractor that is selected by the board, by Howard County Public School System, that will handle the costing side of those things.
Do you have a sense of the size of our buildings versus others, you know, kind of per student?
I don't know if ratio, and again, we're civil engineers, so we typically stay outside the footprint of the building, but I would say they're similar to what we've done in other counties, in the other county.
Have you worked on any, or do you know of anybody doing successful P3 projects for schools?
It's a few years old, but Anne Arundel County has 2 examples of P3 projects, I believe, in the Broadneck area. Not incredibly familiar with those, but I'm aware of reading about those in years past.
Okay, and I think there's some in PG too. Okay, thank you.
Certainly. Thank you.
Carleen Penna, followed by Daniel Britt and James Burkell.
Good evening. My name is Carleen Penna. I live in Columbia. I am in favor of CB 42. I first came to Columbia 30 years ago. My first thought was, wow, nice street names. And the second was, what a great place to raise a family. And that's what we did. We settled down here we've been homeowners for over 25 years. We've raised 2 kids. What makes this community great is because we have placed, as a community, value on education and our children. And that's what this bill is about. Over the past week, all of you have received letters from me and many in my community who are very upset that once again the Hammond High renovations are being pushed off for lack of funds. Possibly had this been addressed in the past, Hammond would already be renovated. Talbot Springs would already be replaced, and High School 13 would already be constructed. We have entire cohorts of students going through schools, through high school, where the facilities are inadequate and where they're terribly overcrowded. This should not happen in this county. What I'm asking is that you continue to work towards fighting for more funding. We have very well-heeled and very strong lobbies in this county that have fought against raising fees at all for this. We need to take care of our kids. This is too important. In my opinion, this bill honestly probably doesn't go far enough. We've heard the gloom and doom. But again, we can look at other counties. It may not be completely the same thing, but we can see that they continue to grow. There is still development. Nothing's going to change. People still want to come to Howard County. That won't change. What will change if we don't increase the funding for the schools is that the education will decrease. You know I can go into great depth about some of the problems that are happening right now at Hammond High. Rotating science labs literally 2 weeks after they do the lesson because there's no lab space. Nasty brown water coming out of water fountains and eye wash machines. I am very happy that I chose Howard County to raise my family in, but my kids are entering into young adulthood now. I honestly don't know if this is where I think they should settle. Hopefully you will pass this bill, and this is your time. It creates a legacy for going forward. I just ask that you don't let us down. Thank you.
Thank you, Carleen, and for all your advocacy for Hammond. Daniel Britt.
Hi. Council members, my name is Daniel Britt. I live on Chestnut Farm Lane over in Ellicott City. I'm testifying today in support of legislation CB 42. I have 2 daughters who attend Hollyfield Station Elementary School. Highfield Station is one of the almost 50% of all elementary schools in our county that are currently over capacity. One of the major contributors to the increase in students causing overcapacity is new developments. The proposed increase in developer fees is a must in order to help fund our schools so that they can adequately accommodate new students that are coming from newly constructed neighborhoods. My children have only been in the Howard County school system for a couple of years, and the biggest issue our family hears at PTA meetings concerns the budget. Our schools are supposed to be one of the best features of our county, yet we struggle with the ability to afford specific classes like technology, full-time maintenance staff, adequate building space for students, and the number of teachers we need, which contribute to large class sizes. Classes such as technology are very important, especially in today's world. Proper use of technology and gaining a firm foundation can be crucial for students, especially for those who, due to financial constraints, might not receive exposure otherwise. My wife and I are both software engineers. We understand how important access to technology is. If we had not had access to technology when we were younger, we would not have gone into the careers we are in today. A full-time maintenance staff ensures our schools operate properly and safely. During a storm last year, my children's school PA system went down. Due to a part-time, understaffed maintenance crew, it took until noon the following day to fix the system. If there was a serious emergency, such as an active shooter or an extreme weather warning, during that downtime, critical information might not have been able to get out in a timely manner and could have ended up costing lives of students or teachers. Large class size has a direct impact on the success of students academically and socially. Class size also encourages problematic behavior because the teacher can't be monitoring each and every student as closely as they would be able to if class sizes were smaller. I understand that the school budget doesn't come solely from developer fees, but increasing them will go a long way to help some of the issues I brought up. Please pass this legislation and give the long overdue developer money to our schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. James Brickell, followed by Julie Kim.
Hello, my name is Jamie Brickell. My wife Susie and I arrived in Howard County from Flemington, New Jersey in 1985 and raised our 3 daughters here. We are now retired but have lived in the same house on Howard Lodge Drive for 34 years. That's almost half of our lifetime. Both of us have worked and paid taxes, both income and real estate, for these 34 years, and thus we feel we have honestly contributed to the well-being of this county. Now we would like to downsize and use our farm investment as an integral part of our retirement support. However, with the proposed bill, CB 42-2019, the county is taking a huge chunk of our retirement money away from us. We have been told this bill will reduce the price of our land by $42,000 a lot. And we have 10 lots. That's almost $500,000. We are not developers. We are people who came here, bought a horse farm, which you couldn't do in Columbia because our family, had horses and they don't like them running up and down Little Patuxent Parkway. We believe in public education, but are wondering at the necessity of a school facility charge for county schools from $1.63, and I've heard that number a couple of different ways, but anyway, to $6.80 per square foot of new housing. Why such a massive increase? Why is it happening all at once? Why are you targeting people like my wife and me who have contributed to this county for many, many years? We are actually being jeopardized in 2 ways. First, the county council passed a bill in July that closed all new home construction in our district for at least 1 year and as many as 4 years. So you add 4 years to my life and who knows. Now, with the threat of CB19, we will add a huge burden on our financial planning. Yep. This bill is reaching into citizens' pockets, and these are landowners' pockets you're reaching into now. The people who have been around here for a good long time and had farms and so on and so forth. We thought we had a pretty good understanding of this county's values. We are now having some serious thoughts. Howard County is the 3rd most affluent county in the United States, following Loudoun and Fairfax counties in Virginia. Young man earlier today said that also. The Howard County Council and School Board should be expected, hang on, I got 2 more sentences to go, expected to forecast spending and school populations more accurately than we have seen in our 34 years of residence. Please don't pass CB 42 and take away our retirement income. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Thank you. Julie Kim, followed by Dan Hajdo and Brent Lovelace.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to council. I'll keep this very short. I am a prospective homebuyer who chose to move to Howard County because I expect excellent public schools for my young children. And I commend council members Rigby, Jung, and Jones for taxing developers to ensure adequate supporting infrastructure for future residents. As we know by now, the consequences are dire when insufficient school spots and facilities are available for children enrolling in Howard County public schools. It is surprising to me that this bill has any pushback, and it's even more alarming that this measure was not in place 10 years ago, because now we have a crisis of overcrowding our most valuable resource, our children. A society that does not value its children does not value its future. Many people move to our county because of its highly ranked school system. The entire Howard County economy suffers when the government withholds adequate resources from the public school system. To ensure our public schools have adequate funds, I recommend you vote yes on CB 42, 2019. Thank you for your time and attention.
Dan Hajdo, Brent Lovelace, followed by Muhammad Haider.
This room is a little emptier than when we had the surcharge fee for the road tax a few months ago. Good evening. I am Brent Lovelace, current president of the PTA Council of Howard County. I am here to speak on behalf of the delegates from 74 local PTAs that individually advocate for children across the entire county school system. Year after year, the PTA Council delegates have approved positions on school surcharges. This month, the delegates unanimously reaffirmed their position with knowledge of the pre-filed bill CB 42, with the superintendent and president-elect of the state PTA in attendance. Their position was one of support for this bill, but more notably, the support of appropriate and accurate mitigation from additional household construction to mitigate growth impacts with permanent school facilities for each grade level in the county. The word accurate is critical. It is reasonable to assume that as advocates for children, any effort that improves children's educational outcomes, safety, and well-being will be welcomed. Yet with accuracy, the entire benefit toward the goal of eliminating overcrowding will be achieved. The concept of mitigation fees is already well established here and elsewhere across the country. The item at hand is choosing the appropriate rate to achieve adequacy. The appropriate rate is not arbitrary and can be derived and levied through many methods proportionately to minimize impact on the most vulnerable populations. The appropriate rate is subject to change as market conditions, state contribution, labor rates, construction costs vary from year to year, which is why a very infrequent review has brought about what may be considered a significant change just to reach parity. It has taken years for the state delegation to enable you, the council, the ability to adjust school surcharges with several exemptions which need to be considered and offset. The statistical data, calculations, assumptions you have been provided to arrive at the appropriate rate contain information which is subject to change based off external influences and actions you may take in future legislation. This information must be publicly available, and there needs to be an ability for all to review and test for accuracy. Through continuous process improvement, the results must deliver adequate school facilities for each new household added in Howard County without detriment to the existing student population. PTAC looks forward toward the council utilizing their additional capabilities to stem a reoccurring issue and offers its support and input toward the continuous process improvement necessary to ensure adequate school capacity for all children at all schools at all times. Thank you. I kind of flubbed the intro, but it is very important. We had a school surcharge per square foot increase just a few months ago. All the doom and gloom was not here. We did not have people testifying on how it affects affordable housing, their businesses, their retirements, and whatnot. Those are still valid issues, but I think we need to take this into consideration. The people are out here debating whether or not we should have adequate public facilities for children, and that is very critical.
Mr. Lovelace, which surcharge are you referring to?
The road tax. Which is
tax.
levied on a per square foot for new housing units. That is the other surcharge that we have in Howard.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because this is also something that folks don't focus a lot on, is we have a road surcharge. We have a moderate income housing surcharge that is twice our school or road surcharge.
That is optional to pay.
It's optional to pay if you don't develop the units.
Right.
However,
It's
in
fee
all
in lieu, really.
in all of District 5, it's very hard to develop the units, so you pay the fee in lieu. So it's just when we start looking at other counties and we're so much lower, there's a lot of money in that house you buy that is coming to the county, and maybe we need to reallocate some of the things that we do, to recognize the current not emergency, but the current critical priorities. They might change over time. So,
and
pointing that out.
You look at the residential construction rates. Granted, these are low dated; they're July numbers, but we have 120,676 housing units in Howard County today. We have roughly 58,000 students. We'll get a September count. That's that's one student for every 2 units that we build very consistently, year after year after year. That includes the moderate incomes, that includes the senior houses, that includes trailers and everything in between. But every time we add 2 new units of construction on average in Howard County, we gain a child, and that child needs a seat, and we can calculate what that seat cost is very easily. This is a very solvable math problem.
And even though in a studio or 1-bedroom apartment you might have 0, new construction's generally going to have more kids. Tends to attract younger families than a lot of the resale homes are folks that are already in the county.
We can debate for hours what residential
and that's,
student yields are, but on average, at the highest level, it's very consistent. And we can look at that when we're applying a broad-based tax to use broad-based numbers to do our calculations.
And that's why new construction's high. It's 42% of that yield. So, a lot of us, when you think about when you moved into your first new neighborhood, it was probably chock full of elementary school kids. So,
I apologize. I am in the house my father built next to the house my grandfather built.
I know.
So I didn't move.
Okay, Brett didn't cause the problem.
But welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Lovelace.
Thank you very much.
The council will take a brief recess and will reconvene at 9:55 p.m.
All right.
So, I want to let you know what the game plan is going to be for the rest of the night. Sorry, we need to take off some of the identifying information so that we're not sharing your public information as well. So, please give the staff just a minute. So next we have Lily Shippey, Jared Spann, Jason Van Kirk, Jason Van Kirk, right there.
Hi, thank you. Jason Van Kirk, Clarksville, Maryland. I reserved this spot for a property owner that has submitted testimony online, the Jerry Mock, Janet Burke. So I'd like to just defer to their testimony at this time.
Thank you. David Dempster. Scott Armiger. Paul Ravel.
Hi, I'm Paul Ravel, Fulton, Maryland, on 7017 Meandering Stream Way. I'm going to be very brief. I'd like to recommend that the council consider 6 changes to the school surcharge. Won't be specific, I'll be sort of, headlines. First, I'd like to suggest that you grandfather projects that are in the pipeline who have made an initial plan submission. Second, I'd like to suggest that you phase the increase over 2 or 3 years. I heard 4 earlier tonight, but you get the idea. Take a look at phasing. Third is I'd like to suggest that you exempt all affordable housing from the surcharge. That probably puts a greater burden on the market rate houses, but maybe that's the way it's got to be. I think you should exempt all senior housing from the surcharge. We've never had a conversion of senior housing to non-senior housing. I don't think we should jump at shadows just yet. I suggest substituting an annual transparent objective formula for the fixed surcharge and the current index approach. And I think that formula should be built around the average cost of a new seat. And if you've done this on Facebook, I'm sorry I haven't seen it yet, but it should be built around the average cost of a new seat, student generation factors from new homes, by region and by unit type, because I think there's a wide variation, certainly from the west to Elkridge, big difference in types of units. I think it should include the state aid for building new school seats. We'd like to see them be as fair to us as they've been in the past, but we're a rich, small county. I suspect that we won't be treated as fairly in the future as we've been treated. And the projected number and type of new housing units and the average square feet for each type of dwelling unit. I think if you do that, as one of the other speakers said, in a formula where the numbers are publicly available, I think Mr. Lovelace said that, where the numbers are available, then a guy like me thinking about a land purchase in the future could take a look at it and make a forecast about what I should do instead of sticking it to Mr. Brickell for $42,000 a lot. That's my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ravel. And we will post it as supporting documentation for the bill.
Great, thank you.
Carolyn Weibel, followed by Maura Dunnigan. Carolyn Weibel or Maura Dunnigan? All right. Ashley Jolissant, Saint. Start taking it personally.
Good evening, Council. First, I want to say thank you. I know that I've spent many hours in a courtroom, and it is exhausting to hear testimony for hours at a time. And I can tell that you're all engaged, and you care, and you're putting your hearts into this, and you're trying to make sure that you make the right decision. So thank you. I am in favor of Council Resolution 42. I think that it is an affirmative step to making sure that our schools and our children have the education that they need and the infrastructure that they need. And right now they don't, because development has taken off exponentially, and the school system hasn't been able to keep up. However, I want to ask that you maybe change the language so that you control where those fees go. have it be construction, maintenance, renovation, so that it's not some brilliant idea that may come up later, right? So it doesn't solve the problem of new schools or making sure that schools are renovated as they need to be, so that you are actually addressing the problems that you're trying to address. And that's all I have. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Cynthia Valancourt, followed by Ernest Harward.
Good evening. I don't usually read my testimony, but I'm going to tonight, and I'm going to talk really fast to try to get it all in. Good evening, and thank you for proposing this legislation and providing the public input opportunity. The proposed legislation is long overdue and critically needed. The school system has been underfunded for many years, both operationally and for capital projects. Operationally, the situation is significantly worse than the community is aware. Although the administration will always say that they will make do with whatever they receive and that staffing levels are appropriate, that just is not the case. When the last budget request was not fully funded, you may have thought they went back to the drawing board and found some waste or fluff to cut. But they balanced the budget by making cuts to things like utilities. To make that work, among other things, air conditioning levels were adjusted up to a point where buildings have not been comfortable, not like you guys here. Last week, when the temperatures broke records and reached into the 90s, the inside temperatures were too high for effective teaching and learning, and if my email is any indication, many students and staff experienced physical symptoms like nausea and headaches. On the capital side, HCPSS is in a particularly acute need of the capital projects that have been proposed, including the Talbot Springs Replacement School and the renovation at Hammond High, not to mention the unacceptable level of deferred maintenance and much-needed renovation projects. This is more than an equity issue, though it is that too. As a citizen and a taxpayer, I want the massive investment our community has made in facilities to be protected by appropriate maintenance. The explosive growth in the numbers of school-aged children who move to Howard County every year is a testament to the quality of life and the public education offered, but the basic and necessary infrastructure to keep up with this growth has been sorely lacking. I have heard the comments from the people in the building and development community. In my former life, I worked for a real estate developer and construction company. We would have tried to minimize these costs too, but in the end, we would have made the basic calculations of cost and profit and planned accordingly. Builders and developers have had it very easy here in Howard County for a long time. I can't tell you how many miles of sewer lines we installed in order to make our projects work. It was a cost of doing business. I understand the effort to convince you that the sky will fall if these fees are increased to a more reasonable level. But in the end, the quality of life that has made this such an attractive community is threatened by the inability of the county to fund the infrastructure needed just to service the increases in demand generated by these very building projects. This legislation already takes many of the legitimate concerns about lower cost housing viability into consideration. If there are other tweaks that make sense, then make them. But it is necessary, fair, and overdue legislation. It is still not enough to cure the funding needs of the community school system, but it's a good start. The capital needs of the school system are in a crisis situation. I would like to suggest you all consider additional measures to fill this gap, like doing the same thing for the school system that was done last year for the fire department. A dedicated additional funding source for the schools is necessary. Now is the time to consider it. There are voting taxpayers paying attention to the needs of the school system right now who don't usually pay much attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Valancourt. I think we actually had an extra one up here, but does, Diane, do you need an extra copy? Thank you. Thank you. Ernest Harward. Bill Erskine. All right, Bill Erskine. Lisa Markovitz.
Good evening, Lisa Markovitz for the People's Voice, Ellicott City, support of CB 42. This has been a long journey. Can you stop for a second? I forgot to hand this in. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. Okay, we've been waiting for years. It's time, thanks to everyone involved in this. I'm going to go over what I feel are the opposition's biggest points against raising these fees and counter them. Myth number 1, this will reduce development, which will cost the county money. First off, development isn't stopping. I don't believe it. But if I did, would it cost us? The fiscal study the county recently did, claiming that development is profitable, is greatly flawed. The conclusion that development is profitable is laughably inaccurate. They put in development revenues, then they put in expenses as debt service. That's like telling your spouse you put a few hundred a month on the credit card bill when you spent tens of thousands, right? So many expenses are left out regarding schools, health, and traffic issues. Then there's forecasts in there about APFO costing us for decades. Really? Have we just forgotten that APFO halts development for only a few years? And it already takes 3 years for development to get through DPZ anyway, so the wait is actually not very long at all. It's certainly foreseeable. You can say you don't care for some reason, but you can't really say that development is currently profitable due to the overwhelmed state of our public services. Myth number 2. This will just raise home prices for buyers and not cost builders. Another fallacy, because new home building does not have a monopoly of supply of housing. After all, don't we hear so much about the massive resales in the county? Demand for new housing is not inelastic. There will be a lowering of demand if prices increase. Many things affect housing market prices, and a supplier's cost increase cannot just be passed through. This is Economics 101. If there were room for higher prices in the market, they would just be higher. Does anyone believe home prices are at cost or below market value? Eventually, if some price increase occurs because there is an effect on a supplier's cost, the lowest priced homes will be affected the least. This school charge, unlike other jurisdiction, is not per unit. It is per square foot. So smaller homes will have less of an increase. And it doesn't even apply at all up to $250,000 of home price. It is the opposite of a regressively applied fee. It's a little known fact, the square footage and the 250 exemption. Myth number 3. If we increase these fees, less development means less affordable housing. I wish this were true, but it's not. At least not for spreading out of affordable housing. And the low rates that we've had so far certainly haven't given us the affordable housing, now has it? First of all, now here, developers are not required to provide any low-income housing, none. They are required to provide 10 to 15% of moderate income housing, and in higher market-priced areas, they pay a fee in lieu of providing it, which concentrates it. Hello, I just explained a cause of income segregation in this county. It isn't because the schools are income segregated, it is because the neighborhoods are. And if they weren't, then everyone would get to go to their closest schools. So I really don't want to hear the builders holding equity seminars and asking for exemptions for affordable housing, because building more is not going to solve the problems that building caused. Lastly, the math done to back into the suggested increase regarding school budget needs has a flaw. It starts with the notion that development causes 42% of student enrollment. That's wrong. I was told by county staff that this calculation was made using 2 years of brand new development student enrollment. It doesn't even follow those kids through in future years and add in further new development. It's just a snapshot of 2 years of development. Also, why are houses only considered new that are less than 3 years old? If a house is resold at 5 years, it wasn't from new development? This is clearly understated. And at a minimum, the majority of school enrollment is from new homes. However, I do know that you can only go so high, but just realize that even at the rate suggested in the bill, that 42% is low. We must raise these fees, they will be paid, and we will earn money for our school system from them surely. Also, please do not overly grandfather projects, as legally you do not have to do that unless a project is broken ground. I'm sure you all have different opinions about where in the process expenses should be frozen, but keep in mind that the woefully low fees have been a benefit to builders for far too long, and we cannot just go years without seeing this revenue. Keep that in mind with your grandfathering decision, if any, and no further exemptions. And then, real quick, I want to say that I don't understand the concern about building a house on your property and having to be held up by APFO, because APFO only applies over 4 units. So I didn't quite understand some of those concerns. Thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you, Ms. Markovitz. And I can also show you 10 years of data I have on the school system enrollment trends if you want.
Thank you for mentioning how the fees in lieu and the county affordable housing policies is leading the concentration of the poverty around the county. And the schools are a symptom, not a cause.
It's absolutely a factor, which is
Yeah,
why I'm so
and
glad we're starting
I'm
our-
all for affordable housing. We just have to do it in a way that spreads it across the county.
Right.
Yes. Well, I'm very grateful that our task force is kicking off. So that way, and I hope that what we end up with is a game plan, not a report, but an actual game plan of what we need to do moving forward. Prince George's and Montgomery both have very interesting ones. So thank you.
Thank you.
Joel Hurwitz, who will be followed by Jerry Mock.
You're up to the Monday sign-ups, huh? Good evening again, Joel Hurwitz, Columbia. For the lawyers in the council, I want to state that I concur in the judgment in part, because I the result, but I don't like how we've gotten here. Particularly, it was mentioned earlier about Carroll County. Their law is, by ordinance or resolution, the county commissioners of Carroll County may impose development impact fees to finance any of the capital costs of additional expanded public works improvements and facilities required to accommodate new construction or development. That is it. Doesn't even use the word schools. Similar language is for the 6 code counties. So we've been treated for 2.5 decades as a charter county. We have less authority than many of these non-home rule counties. Through a succession of local and state representatives from both parties, which I fully do not understand the politics that hasn't presented itself in these other counties, we're treated as a second-class charter county. I disagree with Councilman Young, who said that this is an enabling bill. And actually, it's more of a mandate. On page 3, it says 3 times that you're required to have a surcharge. You cannot repeal it less than it was as of June. And the current language is you can't repeal less than $1. So, as I think Wicomico County repealed their fee at one time. So I wish that the delegation been less confusing, because you've left with number of base years for various calculations of 2004, 2006, 2019, fiscal 2020. And this seems to be exacerbated by the fact that it appears that this goes into effect in 61 days after enactment, not some fixed date. So people are going to be rushing to get their building permits in. You've moved the operative language from section 142 with a mandatory inflation adjustment to 143 is the operative language with permissiveness for the council, which then is based on a building permit of 2004, which seemed that needs some clarity when the building permit, especially if you're going to keep escalating that in the future, because it's unclear of if the old building permits apply. As pointed out, there's a 2000 exemption, which now, I guess, 250 through inflation adjustment. Seems to give an incentive for condos, which I've been advocating for the Affordable Housing Land Trust Act development. Maybe this will give an incentive to that. Also, having detached garages, they're exempt. And I also want to point out on page 5, there seems to be a subsection I and then K. We seem to be missing a J.
It's always appreciated.
Thank you.
Jerry Mock. Christine Amari. Janet Burke. Betty Wygenet. Weiganat, Bob Weiganat, Carly Weiganat, Alberto Diaz,
Good evening. My name is Alberto Diaz, just like you said. I've been a resident of the county now for about now 11 years, living in Clarksville. 3 children that are now split amongst lower, middle, and high schools. So I'm seeing it all. I don't have a testimony to share that is written, but I will submit that by the other methodologies that are available. Just want to talk a little bit about the realities of this process here and what we're asking for here, which I think is really important. We need additional funding. I think a lot of points have been made tonight that say that and more. I'm a developer. I don't develop houses. I develop power plants in different countries, sometimes in the U.S. as well. Whether you develop houses or power plants, the methodology is pretty similar. You go to a market and try to figure out where the prices merit new building. You look at comparables. You look at things that point to sufficient margin, right? Well, this impact fee that we're talking about here, while is going to be, in my mind, critical for what we need for the schools, it is something that, if done properly and at the levels at which it's being discussed, at the $6 level, that is comparable to adjacent counties and communities, it's not necessarily going to make us less competitive as a county. So what we hear from developers where they say, oh, well, you know, we're going to be having to raise home prices, we're going to be doing things that are going to be detrimental to tax revenues and things like that to the county, those things are just absolute fallacy. The reality is, if we have a brand as a county and that brand is education and a high level of excellence around that, and we are able to keep that by not messing with that and adding a lot of questions to that, I think that we will be able to compete just on that basis to the extent that our tax revenues are similar to those around us. So for that reason, I am for this, for CB 42. I think that we have a lot of ground to make up for over the last at least 11 years that I've been here, where a lot of those revenues have been actually left on the table as a county. And as a result, the schools have suffered. The educational level in many regards has also done the same. I appreciate and value that there's this attention to the smaller income housing, this exemption that we've talked about today as well, because I do believe that while this topic of equity that's been floated around tonight so freely is important, it is more important that we do it organically inside the communities where the schools are, so that we all grow organically. That's my testimony, and I'm for CB 42. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your perspective, Mr. Diaz. Ned Howe. Jeez.
Just call me Hoppy.
We are so sorry for whatever has happened to you.
Hopefully it improves what I've had for the last 15 years, so good for the glass half full. My name, as you said, is Ned Howe. I'm with Enterprise Homes, part of the Enterprise family of companies. I've testified before you guys before, so I think you guys are familiar with Enterprise and that we're founded and headquartered in downtown Columbia. So we won't go there too hard. There's been a lot of things said from the affordable housing perspective. Obviously, that's where we're coming from. I got some facts here. You can look at those, really get to the issue. People have been very eloquent in how they describe the housing crisis that is in Howard County, and not just Howard County alone, everywhere. Affordability and housing cost burdens and things like that are very prevalent in this county, and we're hopefully at the forefront of trying to address them. But I just wanted to go into a little bit about what affordable housing is about to us from a very simple perspective.
Affordable housing is not made affordable without the help of the municipalities in which we actually build the affordable housing within. So it's no secret that our entitlement costs, our construction costs, our operating costs for affordable housing is no different than any of those in market rate development. We don't really have contractors that say, we'll charge you 2 cents for your nail and 10 cents for the other guys. And we're paying the same rates, we're paying the same fees, and we're having to deal with that. So the affordability that's really created is about us as developers, about stakeholders within the community, and that includes the municipality itself, patching together a financing package that ultimately allows the residents of these communities to live in safe, high-quality housing at a rent burden that's really in line with their income. Without being able to cobble together, and you've heard some people talk about the number of resources or sources we have in our deals. I mean, some of them we have up to 9 in a particular deal, so it's not your typical financing package. It's something that we really struggle really, really hard to put these deals together. The tools that we generally use outside of the municipalities are, low-income housing tax credits. You've heard that talked about. State rental housing and subordinate debt plans, state grants, federal grants, grants and loans from philanthropic organizations as well. We'll tap into whatever we can tap into. Now, typically within the municipalities that we work within, we have, once again, some grants, some loans that we can get, waivers of fees of things that are offered in lots of municipalities. I don't know that we see a lot of that in Howard County. Infrastructure improvements, rent subsidies, tax abatement, which we do know is fairly prevalent in Howard County. And land contributions sometimes. So we're looking for some sort of help from the municipality in any way to try to make these transactions work. The problem is that if we have something like those contributions, we're generally leveraging whatever's within the local municipality about 10 times. So a lot of these affordable housing deals that you're seeing are, there may be a small contribution for the local municipality that's leveraged 10 times to actually create the product at the end. So this significant increase in the school facilities surcharges proposed will be an additional burden that we won't necessarily be able to get help from Howard County to serve. We generally have to go outside of the county to try to get the resources to pay for this potential increase that's out there. Let me go through my last paragraph here. So we urge the county to carefully consider the detrimental impacts that this bill will have on affordable housing that is yet to be built to address the housing affordability crisis. We understand there's tremendous pressure to generate revenue to facilitate school improvements. We understand that. But we also understand that because of the extremely limited resources available to support affordable housing, there is not a significant windfall revenue that can be generated from these affordable housing developments, because typically they're an extremely small fraction of the development that's going on in this particular county. So therefore, should this bill move forward, we urge the county to exempt affordable housing developments from the full extent of the increase.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Biplab Pal.
Good evening. I'm Biplab from Ellicott City, and I'm here to testify for 2 amendments. And I believe without 2 amendments, this bill can bring disaster to environment to Howard County. I heard both, arguments both in favor and against, and I believe those arguments are based on economic rationality, not on sustainability. And as we are entering into a new phase of human civilization, where I believe that our economic argument has to be counterbalanced with environmental sustainability. Now look at where we live. Half an hour of rainfall, and we get flash flood warning into our smartphone. We can't survive even half an hour of rainfall in this county because we don't have waterways for the build that we already have. And on top of that, when I hear about more development, no matter how you argue it for balancing the school budget or for having that economic viability, it defies the cause of sustainability because we really do not have proper drainage system in this county. I mean, look at how human civilization was built. Even 5,000 years back, when Mesopotamia, Harappa was built, first thing they did, they built their water system. And we don't have it in Howard County, and we are claiming we are an advanced civilization. So what I want the bill to look at the economic sustainability point of view, that how it will impact, and I do believe that 2 amendments might help. So the first one, I should suggest that you should go by slab-wise increase of In fact, I should suggest that you should increase the surcharge higher on units that are larger than 4,000 and 5,000 square feet, because I believe they can afford, and in fact, it should be more than $20 to $25 per square feet. And lower stuff, let's say less than 2,000, I would say the present rate is sustainable. And between 2,000 to 5,000, you may think in between $10 to $15 per square feet. Because as I said, we should not encourage more housing unit. That might call further disaster. I have seen what happened to the Patapsco River basin. We have destroyed the basin with more development. The second one, I want to point out to the page 5, line number 15, where it says that surcharge can balance the educational budget. I think that can be disaster. But you should say that the surcharge should be strictly be used for the purpose of the only building, because it happened in Montgomery County that this increasing surcharge did not help them. It actually, kind of really didn't go to the more building, school building. It actually was spent up on the administrative fees. So thank you. I think that too should be taken care of.
Okay, I just have one question.
Sure.
You're suggesting that the education surcharge must follow a slab. A slab, you mean like the bottom of a house, like the slab that a house is on?
No, I'm saying slabs in terms of the square foot buildup. For example, a housing unit less than 2,000 square feet should have less surcharge as compared to housing unit more than 5,000 square feet that should be charged way more than $20 per square feet. I think they can afford it.
Okay, so a house that is 2,000 to 3,000 square feet should get $12.
I do believe so. As I said, we should discourage further development into the county, because I'm coming from the argument of sustainability rather than economic viability. Because I think both should be balanced today where we stand.
All right.
So a house that's being built out in the western part of the county, 6,700 square feet, 1,000 because we include basements, include garages. Like, you're cool with increasing the cost of the house $200,000?
Absolutely, because
even if that family has 2 kids in school.
Yes, the reason being they can afford, because see, I live in a house of 3,000
They
square
can.
feet.
How do you know they can afford what they can afford? Do you understand that they can move
I
4
can-
miles away into Carroll County?
I can very well say from my experience, I live in a 3,000 square feet house with 2 kids, and I feel even that's a luxury, considering that if I have a 5,000 square feet, it will be more utility bills, means I'm getting more carbon negative. You are spending up way more energy than you should. It's a responsibility of every citizen today to reduce their footprint of living. If you don't do that, we are heading for disaster, and everybody should be responsible.
So your argument is based around for the climate change. for
Absolutely.
sustainability.
We should be concerned about climate change to every bill we pass to this county.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Buffy Illam? Buffy Illam? Eric Mulata?
Good evening, Chairperson Rigby and members of the Council. Thank you for your time and your commitment to making a just and fair decision on this issue. My name is Eric Mulata. I'm a development director with the Howard Hughes Corporation in Columbia. Howard Hughes is a big supporter and believer of Howard County Public Schools. We have shown this not only by paying the current $1.35 per square foot school surcharge fee, but also in many other ways, which a fair accounting would consider in evaluating the fee for downtown Columbia. First, in addition to the current fee, we make an additional contribution of $1.33 per square foot on all residential and commercial construction to fund public facilities, including schools. Second, over the past year, we've donated 3 elementary school sites, Clary's Forest, Dickinson, Huntington, totaling 32 acres of land at 0 cost. These sites are worth over $17 million. The school system has already prepared site plans showing that the sites are well suited for future schools. Third, Property taxes generated by the Downtown Columbia development are earmarked to ultimately fund $45 million in general obligation bonds to pay for construction of new elementary schools. Chairperson Rigby, I saw your video boiling down the issue to a math problem, and I would like to follow similar logic in explaining what we already contribute. The Downtown Columbia plan includes 6,200 residential units, 1,200 of which are built, leaving about 5,000 units left. At an average of about 1,000 square feet per unit, there's 5 million square feet of residential development remaining for downtown. The total commercial development in the plan is about 6 million square feet. We've delivered about 800,000, leaving about 5,200,000 square feet of commercial development to go. So the split is about 50-50. As already noted, Howard Hughes contributes another $1.33 per square foot on all new development, residential and commercial. The total public facilities payment contemplated in the Downtown Columbia MOU is $12 million. So if you take the $17 million for the school sites, add the $12 million for the additional public facilities fee that we agreed to in the MOU, it's about $29 million. On the $5 million of remaining residential square feet, that works out to be about $5.80 per square foot. So if you take the $6.80 per square foot proposed for the new school surcharge, subtract the $5.80 per square foot, that leaves you with about $1 per square foot in fair share, when we already pay $1.35 per square foot surcharge on all our residential development. And all this still doesn't take into account the fact that our residential developments generate very few students compared to typical single-family residential construction. Our units are small. I'll just finish up here. 70% of the units in our new buildings are studios and one bedrooms. In most of these units are rented by either couples without kids or singles. So some data from the Metropolitan 10 M&M flats. Those apartment buildings, about 817 units, produce 42 school-age children, about 10% of the school generation rate for a typical Howard County residential unit. Thank you for hearing my testimony. I hope you will take it into consideration when determining a fair school surcharge for downtown Columbia.
Do you know what your actual student yield is out of the 817?
It's 42,
units?
42 kids.
Oh, man, I was wrong. I thought it was 41. That is 0.05. It's
Yeah.
1/10 of what the county average is.
Yeah.
So if this really was meant to match, you know, who's contributing to schools, and the right number was 680, you guys should be paying 68 cents. So if we're going to do the math. So
I appreciate the math, as I'm sure Dr. Jones does. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Jones has a PhD in math and loves math. Tanya Tiffany.
Good evening, council members. My name is Tanya Tiffany. I'm an unaffiliated voter in District 4. And I wanted to be really brief because you guys have been here for a really long time and there's more people to talk after me. I just wanted to mainly give my support for CB 42 and thank you for bringing it on and for having the chutzpah to do it. I know that you're getting a lot of flack, hearing a lot of facts and figures from developers, some very real concerns from homeowners who are trying to build on their property. And I don't envy you, but I do fully support this very much needed increase in the surcharge because our schools desperately need it. And that's all there is. Thank you.
C.